People, as in plural, as in several, have declared this one of the worst games ever made, and if they indeed believe that, I would urge those critics to spend just one day beyond the walls of their coddled little world in which only indie darlings and marquee releases from major publishers warrant the practice of their job. I mean, if you think this game is bad, try covering the Wii in 2011. Then you can come tell me, after you've emerged from catatonia, how maybe Amy isn't quite as bad as you thought.
I'm okay. I'm not gonna hurt you.
I need to find a little girl. Have you seen anyone?
You're the first normal person I've seen in hours.
Now, it's worth mentioning, given the influence of hype in this industry, the disastrous response this game has received since its release earlier this month. The Xbox 360 version has an abysmal 2.3 on Metacritic, a site that aggregates review scores from prominent game publications. Now, for some perspective, that's lower than Sexy Poker, Game Party 3, and Calvin Tucker's Redneck Jamboree. Amy isn't as bad as Calvin Tucker's Redneck f***ing Jamboree. Aside from illustrating how pointless review scores are, I mention this to temper the prevailing narrative about how Amy is a disaster of catastrophic proportions. This is a very bad game, there's no disputing that, but it's far from the worst game ever made. Amy is a collection of genuinely interesting ideas held down by terrible execution. Another one of those games that embodies the unfortunate cliché, oh, what might have been. Amy is a survival horror game in which disappointment is the greatest obstacle to survive. It tells the story of Amy, an autistic girl with strange abilities. Playing as her caretaker Lana, you're riding on a train with Amy when there's suddenly a massive explosion. You regain consciousness to find a ravaged world where survivors are relegated to the shadows, mumbling about the end of days. The story is like a George A. Romero interpretation of Rain Man. Amy is the key to Lana's survival, and when you're separated, Lana experiences firsthand the horrific effects of the infection that's destroying the world. She starts to hear voices, she's haunted by visions, and if she doesn't get back to Amy in time, she dies. The idea is Amy is the purifier keeping Lana safe from the infection, and that really serves as the foundation for most of Amy's gameplay. When walking hand in hand with Amy, Lana's fine, but when the game separates you, whether to solve a puzzle or for a narrative purpose, Lana slowly begins to die. She can stave off the infection with an injection, but ultimately her only chance for survival is to get back to Amy. Basically, it's an interesting survival horror twist on the old light and dark mechanic. It's an idea we've seen in horror titles before, think Shadows of the Damned, and even games like Metroid Prime 2. So it is a great concept, but tragically, Amy is only ever great in theory. The gameplay that surrounds that concept is almost shockingly banal, with a combat system that feels 15 years old and controls that make those tank complaints about Resident Evil seem like nitpicking. Now, fortunately, puzzles are the game's focus. Unfortunately, they're repetitive as hell, no pun intended, and stop being interesting the 5th time you've been asked to send Amy through a crawl space. There are some genuinely clever ideas beneath the utter mediocrity that defines this game, and the sad thing is that the game itself doesn't seem to know how to capitalize on them, and for that, Amy is a massive disappointment. And it's not the worst game ever made, but that's the only compliment it deserves.
But I don't